Next question. I hear many talking about gross profit dollars per build hour and gross revenue per build hour. How are these numbers used, and what should a target be?
So I work forward and backward in my business. And so I've got 5 technicians. We're $120 an hour. Parts to labor ratios are blah, blah, blah. 5 technicians, we should be doing about 3.1 million. Okay. And there's a formula for all that. You know, your hour is worth your effective labor rate times 1 plus parts over labor. So when you do that formula, you can say, you know, I'm $120 an hour. I'm almost 50-50 parts and labor, so I'm worth about $230 an hour. So, and I've got these 5 techs, and 5 techs are going to do about 1,960 hours a year. And I'm going to multiply times 5 times that, and then times what my hour's worth. And I don't have my calculator here. I only have this one, and it's flawed right now. It's too early in the morning. So that's about probably 3.1, somewhere between 2.8 and 3.1. So now I'm saying to myself, I'm going to work 1960 hours. That's what my shop's going to be open, or 2,000 or whatever. And I want to make sure I make enough money to put 20% in the bottom line. So 3,600,000. So I need a certain amount of gross profit so that I have a certain amount of net profit. And I know what my bills are, which is what we talked about, you know, understand what your costs are. And so after I take my tech and my parts out, I should have 62% GP if my tech's loaded. If he's unloaded, I'm probably looking at 74, 75, 76. And that's dollars per hour brought into the shop, gross profit. And so you know what that dollar amount is. You can figure it out because you know what your hour's worth, and you can say 62 cents of that I want, you know, percent of that I want left. So that's gross profit dollars per hour per tech. Okay?
Yeah.
And so now I have this pile of money left, which again, if you look at I think the first or the second one we did, where we said, you know, my labor cost is 20% and my parts cost is 18% or 20%, and I have left over 62%. That's my gross profit dollars. So if I take my 5 techs times 1 hour of time, and then I take that by 0.62 and do the math, then I know that I'm supposed to have, I don't know, $583.29 an hour in gross profit coming into my shop, which would then lead to a certain amount of net profit at 20% of the overall amount. And I can work it backwards, and I can figure out exactly what gross profit I need to have. And so there's this argument in our industry, well, Cecil, is it gross profit dollars per hour or is it margin, right? Which one is most important? Well, everything is about profit and making a profit and making the right profit on your business. So if you want to measure gross profit dollars, that's perfect, right? Because that's what you actually get after you pay for parts and labor.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to look at your business. But if you don't have margin, you don't have gross profit dollars. Here's the fallacy, right? Oh, I'll just focus on gross profit dollars. I can do these big jobs because they bring in more gross profit dollars per hour, which I'm not so sure. But let's say we take a brake job, and I'm going to do a brake job, and my customer's going to pay $600, but after I pay for parts and labor, it's going to bring, I don't know, $380 in gross profit in an hour and a half. So divide that by 1.5, you know, whatever that is, okay? And again, my calculator's not working perfectly. In fact, let's just say it's an hour, and it's going to bring in $380. Now I'm going to do a set of tires, and I'm not making as much margin. See, on the parts and labor on the brake job, I made 70% margin on the parts, and I made, I don't know, 68% margin on the labor. High margin job, right? But it brought in $380. Now I'm going to sell a set of tires. We're going to sell big tires, like $500 tires. $2,000. I'm making 40% on the tires when it's all said and done. So 40% of that, $2,000. Come on, somebody help me out. I am really not working well. $800. So I got $800 in gross profit on an hour's work with a set of tires if I made 40% on the tires. And I got $380 on a set of brakes. Had a higher margin. This had lower margin, right? So it depends on the type of work you're doing. But I think that for our purposes, because we're not necessarily tire stores, and we're not going to sell that many sets of tires, or we're not necessarily engine shops, and often an engine job, is estimated lower because it's a big job, so it's estimated lower, has lower margin. We end up going over the time. We end up spending more because we got 3 parts we got to get that we didn't know. And so the margin shrinks, although it may bring in more gross profit dollars per hour. And so you got to look at the balance of it all and make sure that the dollars that you have are the dollars that you need.
I have found, when I look at big jobs, let's say you do a rear main seal job, right? Well, that's got 10 hours of labor in it, and there's no parts on it, right? It's got minimal parts, and so your gross profit per hour is in the tank. People ask all the time, why do you say that testing is oftentimes a kind of a loss leader? You shouldn't say loss leader, but it's low gross profit dollars per hour because you're not selling parts.
But you have a lot of shops.
And the number of shops
now that are charging time and a half on a test. So instead of being, $150 an hour, now I'm $225 because I'm putting an extra half an hour in to that to make up for the parts I'm not selling. Right?
Right. Well, and so that was one of the things. I've got a lot of shops who will say, hey, will you just look at these numbers and tell me if I'm healthy or not? Or, what should I do? Who should I talk to? And a lot of these people, they say, oh, we're doing great. We're doing great. We're making lots of money. Look at this. We're $600,000 or $1 million a year. And then you start looking, and all of a sudden, either labor's really low or labor's really high, and the parts are proportionately out. Because they did 20 engines, and then they did those 20 engines at 20%, and the gross profit per hour is in the tank, right? Because there was no money in the big job as they had so many hours in it.
You also have to think about liability, which is rarely considered. Okay?
Yeah.
I had a shop do 2 Porsche engines. I think I said this before. $30,000 each. And when he told me I had a great month, I had such a great month. It's 2 Porsche engines, $30,000 a piece. Well, I work with some of the top Porsche shops. We're charging $125,000, $150,000 for an engine rebuild, not 30. And the next month, one of the engines blew up, and he had to redo it for free, which wiped out all of his profit on everything. And he told me, I'm never going to do another Porsche engine in my shop, right?
Why not just charge what you need to charge?
And that's where I'm at. It's like, I have these guys that say, I don't want to work on old cars. Okay. And I get it. They're harder. They're rusty. They're this, they're that. Things break. But I'm kind of greedy. I like old cars because they are rusty and things break. I just charge more for older cars. And so it makes sense to do the job. I just don't want to work with crappy customers. Right? That's my caveat. If you got an old car and you're a nice customer.
How much does the consumer value that car?
Yeah.
Is the deciding factor, not the age of the car.
So the gross profit dollars per hour, great measurement. I want to know, and I can look at jobs and say, this is a great job for us because it brings in really good gross profit dollars per hour. But really, the judge is, what do you earn net profit after everything's said and done for? And so you can't give up margin, because when you give up margin, you have to bring a lot more dollars through the shop to make the same GP per hour.
Well, and one of the things I think is important about this, that we often don't talk about is being realistic about what your shop's potential is and what you're actually going to produce.
Skill set.
I've seen a lot of shops take the gross profit per hour number and they calculate it and they say, well, if my guys do 12 hours a day every single day, and then they put that calculation in, the problem then becomes, well, now if they turn 8 hours a day, if they turn 6 hours a day, their profitability is skewed because they based it on that number.
So there's another direction we're going to go here, and we're going to not right this second, but if productivity drops, so I don't know how you do 12 hours unless you have 1.5 guys, because that's, to me, one of the major things is where's my productivity? Because if you're paying flat rate, it's a kind of who cares? So, out of every hour I'm charging at 120, I'm paying out $30. Flat rate. Well, what happens if your guy does 12 hours this week? Not only did you not bring in the gross profit dollars, but you kept paying him, but he didn't get paid anything. You got a guy that made $360, can't take care of his family. He's not going to work harder. He's not going to be happier, etc. If you're hourly or salary in any way, shape, or form, and your guy did, 12 hours this week instead of 40, your cost of labor just went through the roof. And you have no gross profit dollars per hour. So productivity is one of the things that's absolutely strangling this industry to death. And most of the time, the productivity is not the fault of the technician. It's the fault of the systems and processes within the business.
Agreed.
So,
100%.
There's a bunch of different things, and it's not, in my mind, it's not that complicated. But if you don't know them, it's complicated.